Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Free Zone. First things first, we do have some Texas schools in action tonight in the playoffs. This would be the second round of the playoffs, I believe, in Texas. The only one that I've seen a score on so far, and we've got people looking for scores behind the scenes, but the only one I've seen a score on so far is Canyon leads Fort Stockton 31-7 in the third. And a lot of those games will be getting to about halftime about now if they were 7 o'clock kickoffs. So that's kind of the first thing. But tonight we're going to talk about the playoffs here in Kansas. We're down to the final four in each classification, and we'll take a look at those. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the Oklahoma area teams and their playoff games tomorrow evening. And we're going to talk about what everybody seems to be talking about on social media in the state of Kansas, and that is the proposal that passed the KSHSAA Executive Board, which will now go to the KSHSAA Board of Directors, and that proposal would push the beginning of the winter sports seasons back to January 15th. But there are other things that it will do as well. And so that's one of the main things that we'll take a look at tonight. As a matter of fact, we'll take a look at that right now. And I'm just going to kind of read this and then we'll talk about it a little bit. All right. The proposal would delay competition for all winter activities until Friday, January 15th. It would allow virtual competition only in Debate and Scholars Bowl. Okay, so Debate and Scholars Bowl would be virtual only. And they've already been doing some, I don't know about Debate, but I know they've already been doing some Scholars Bowl virtually. I'm sure they've been doing some virtual debate as well. Winter activity practice may continue when appropriate to do so through December 22nd. All KSHSAA risk mitigation protocols must be strictly enforced. They would extend the winter moratorium from December 23rd to January 3rd. So they'd stretch that. Normally it's 5 days. They're going to stretch that to 10 days of practices, and practices then would resume January 4th. And restrictions eliminate contact between coach, athlete, school, and no school or facility use during that 10-day moratorium. There would be a tentative resumption of competition on January 15th. The fact that they use the word tentative tells you that they're going to reconsider that between now and then. No fans for competitions from January 15th to January 29th, and limited fans after January 29th for the remainder of the winter competitions. There would be mandatory universal masking, with exceptions to athletes in competition and officials during live action, and no invitational tournaments. Now, as far as I know, the no invitational tournaments applies to wrestling as well as basketball, but it doesn't say specifically here, so I don't know that completely. But if that does apply to wrestling as well as basketball, then that means all you're going to have in wrestling is duels and double duels, basically, okay? Now, it also sets some high school competition limits. The basketball season would be limited to a maximum of 13 games. Okay, right now it's 20 games. You can sometimes get an extra game or two in a tournament, especially if you have a large league. Okay, but so it cuts that from 20 games down to 13 games. Bowling would have a maximum of 8 days per team. Swimming and diving, a maximum of 6 competitions per athlete. Wrestling, a maximum of 12 events and 20 competition points. There are also restrictions on middle schools, but we're not going to worry too much about the restrictions on middle schools. Now, this has passed the executive board, okay? But it has not passed the board of directors. It still has to be voted on by the board of directors now before it becomes official. So it is just a proposal at this point. It has not officially become, policy for KSHSAA. Now the board of directors is what, like, I think there's 79 people on the board of directors or something in that neighborhood. What you've got is you've got area representatives. You've got a representative from each league in the state. You've got representatives from the State Board of Education. You've got representatives from several other agencies. Okay, so the executive board is a large board, and it's got to pass the executive board. Now, I don't know if that's a simple majority that it has to pass the executive board by, or if there's some threshold, like a 2/3 threshold or something like that. I don't believe so. I believe it is just a simple majority now that it has to pass the board of directors by. So already I've seen on social media a lot of kind of backlash against this. The let us play or let them play hashtag is growing popular again on Twitter. And kind of like with when they proposed moving the football season back, which was only by a week. I'm not going to pretend like I have the medical expertise to know whether this is necessary or not, okay? Obviously, we see the coronavirus once again really spiking around us. It has gotten worse and worse over the last few weeks. And that is what has triggered this, obviously. There's also the fact that while the coronavirus has shown that it is not nearly as likely to be transmitted from person to person outside, it is much more transmissible inside. And obviously the winter sports are inside sports. And while we talk about close contact in football, the level of contact in football is really not even comparable to the level of contact in wrestling. And so that's where they're really going to try to, I'm sure, have to try to limit exposure. And that's why the limits on the limits on wrestling were pretty, to me, pretty extreme. The only thing you can do, you can't limit the level of contact. The only thing you can try to do in wrestling is try to limit the time of contact. Try to shorten either hold down the number of matches that a wrestler wrestles, or hold down the length of each match, reduce the time of each match. To me, that's the only way really to reduce exposure. Now, I know they've got a whole set of protocols around wrestling and a whole set of protocols for each sport. But yeah, to me, the wrestling is the one that to me is just, I don't know how. I know they've got their own set of protocols. I'm not going to pretend like I'm enough of an expert to know how they're really going to limit exposure in wrestling. That's the one that to me is kind of a mystery. But that's the proposal that's before us. A lot of people are against it. My guess is a lot of people are for it. Usually the people that are in favor of something are the ones that don't speak up as much. And my guess is, look, here's the thing. The people making these decisions, and I said this back during football season, they're not trying to wreck anybody's season. They're not trying to keep anybody from playing. They're not trying to punish anyone. What they're trying to do is they're trying to keep people safe, okay? They may not always be right, but I do think that they always have the best interests of athletes at heart. And there are no good choices in these situations. There are only varying degrees of bad choices. Okay. So that's one thing I would say, yeah, I understand we want to play. I understand that, I understand all the pros of playing. I understand the cons. Okay. We went through it in football season. Is this a little different? Yeah, it is a little different, okay? At the same time, a lot of the same arguments for it still apply, okay? Yeah, we're not seeing a whole lot of kids getting sick. When we do, they're generally doing okay. But what we are seeing, if we see any hospitalized at all, and this is where the real concern comes in, is right now what we're seeing is hospitals that are getting close to full, that are either full or close to full all across the state. And we're seeing, situations where there's nowhere to transfer people to. Okay. And so that's kind of what has prompted this, obviously. The governor, either yesterday or today, I think it was yesterday, announced a statewide mask mandate. Now, last time that she announced a mask mandate, each individual county had to basically pass it. This time, basically, she's given each of the counties a week to come up with their own plan for masking, or her executive order goes into effect. I don't know if there are going to be any challenges to her order or not, but what I'm telling you is, guys, it's getting serious. Okay. And that's not to say that it hasn't been serious in the past, but we're reaching a point here where things could potentially begin to get very dangerous. Now, at the same time, the coronavirus is still the coronavirus. It's still the same disease that we've been dealing with. Okay. We got through most of the fall sports pretty well. We're not quite done with football yet. We're getting close, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I realize that it's a little different when we come inside, and that's going to change the dynamic of things. So what I'm telling you is, I hate to argue either for or against this thing. Yes, I think we need kids playing. I think that for some kids, not playing is more dangerous than any coronavirus. Okay, for some kids, not for all kids, but for some kids. I think that, some kids really need that. They really need the discipline. They really need being a part of a team, the sense of belonging. They really need the competition, whatever it is. Everybody's needs are different. And all of us want to see athletes being athletes. All of us want to see our athletes playing. Okay. The question is, can we do it in a way that's safe for the athletes and safe for the community? And now we're getting to the point where, rather than worrying about individual athletes, what we're having to worry about is the community. And so what I'm saying is, more than anything, yeah, we all want the sports seasons to go on. We all want everything to go well. But the guys that are making some of these decisions, they have tough decisions to make. And probably, deserve for you to cut them a little bit of slack here. There are no good decisions in situations like this. And so just keep that in mind. These are people who, most of them, have spent their whole lives as educators or involved with athletics. They do it because they love kids and they want to see kids, do well in life. And just keep that in mind before you get too hypercritical of all the decisions they make. All right. That's the end of sermon on that. Okay. Let's take a look at the Kansas playoffs here real quickly. We're down to the final four in each classification. Okay. And we've got some pretty good matchups here in the semifinals. And we've got a couple of teams that I'm going to highlight to you that are real surprise teams to make it through to the semifinals here. And we're going to start off in 8-man Division II, the smallest division in the state. On the east side of the bracket, you've got Hanover versus Frankfort. And on the west side of the bracket, you've got Victoria versus St. Francis. I believe these four teams have 3 losses between them. Okay. So you've got probably, it looks like definitely the 4 teams with the best records made it to the Final Four. This is going to be a good Final Four here. You've got teams, I think, Hanover, Frankfort, Victoria, St. Francis, all of them have probably been this deep before in the playoffs. Those are names that you hear a lot in 8-man ball. And so we ought to have a great Final Four here in 8-man too. Now, remember, the state championship games will be played a week from Saturday, the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Okay. I don't think any of the venues have changed, so the 8-man games will be played in Newton, I believe. Okay. All right. The other 8-man Final Four. On the east side of the bracket, you have Little River, which has 1 loss, and they will be playing Madison Hamilton, which is undefeated. And on the west side of the bracket, you've got Leota Wichita County, who is undefeated, and they're taking on Hoxie, who has 1 loss. By the way, Hoxie's 1 loss is to Leota Wichita County. Okay, so that again ought to be a great matchup. Hoxie gets a chance for revenge there in the West semifinals, and Little River and Madison Hamilton are definitely the 2 best teams in the East. In 1A, we had a little bit of an upset in 1A West where Oakley came back and beat Smith Center. Smith Center beat Oakley in the regular season. Oakley bounced back and beat Smith Center in the playoffs. So the west side of the bracket in 1A has Oakley versus Inman. And the east side of the bracket, and these names are going to sound kind of alike, so I'll try to enunciate clearly. You have Olpe versus Linden. One side, Oakley versus Inman. The other side, Olpe versus Linden. Olpe has been ranked number 1 in the state in several of the rankings all season pretty much. Olpe is undefeated. Linden has 1 loss. So again, you got a heck of a matchup in the semifinal game. In 2A, on the east side of the bracket, we've got Rossville. They're undefeated versus Nemaha Central, who has 1 loss. And one of the great stories of the playoffs on the west side of the bracket is 5-6 Beloit versus Hoisington. Hoisington is undefeated, and Hoisington is really probably the favorite to win 2A. Now, Beloit has a great story. Beloit came into the playoffs at 2-6. They just kind of limped into the playoffs, and they've won 3 playoff games since then. They're now 5-6. Now, the beauty of being 5-6 in the semifinals is you've got to win a state championship in order to have a winning season. Okay, they still need 2 more wins to get to 7-6 and secure a winning season. So Beloit is a surprise team into the semifinals, but they're a team that has made some deep playoff runs in the past. They've got a great history, and that has probably helped Beloit in the playoffs this year. Beloit beat TMP in the first round. And TMP looked pretty darn tough right up to the point where Beloit beat them in the first round. And so Beloit, they've had a tough way through. So Beloit and Hoisington, hopefully it's going to be a great game. But, you got to love the underdog in games like that. In 3A, excuse me. In 3A, we've got Andale versus Collegiate. On the west side of the bracket, Andale is undefeated. They've been ranked number 1 in 3A most of the season. Collegiate has 1 loss. I believe their 1 loss may be to Andale. And you've got a rematch here in the playoffs. And then on the east side of the bracket, you've got Perry-Lecompton versus Holton. So again, Holton definitely is a traditional power. And Holton, I believe, is coached by one of the Barta kids, the son of Coach Barta from Smith Center. I think. I'm trying to remember his name. His first name is escaping me, but one of the Barta kids, as far as I know, is still at Holton. So they've got a great tradition there at Holton as well. Now let's take a look at 4A. 4A on the east side of the bracket, we've got a couple of schools that I think are both in the Johnson County area. You've got St. James Academy versus Bishop Miege. And on the west half of the bracket, you've got McPherson versus Ark City. Now, Ark City is not a traditional power by any means. Okay, and Ark City has the same record as Beloit did in 2A. Ark City made the playoffs at 2-6. Has won 3 games now, and now they're sitting in the semifinals at 5-6. Ark City has been a 5A school before. They've dropped down to 4A, and that may have helped them. My guess is their 2-6 record came against pretty tough competition and probably 5-6A competition. I don't know that. I don't remember off the top of my head. But knowing what Ark City's Arc City's schedule has been in the past. My guess is that it has been, and so that again should be. But McPherson has been a prohibitive favorite most of the year. McPherson has looked tough, and they've beaten some good teams. So Arc City's really going to have to play well to get by McPherson. My guess is you're going to see McPherson into the finals, but I would love to see Arc City win it. All right, in 5A, in the east half of the bracket, we've got two Johnson County teams, St. Thomas Aquinas versus Mill Valley, and you've got two Wichita teams in the west side of the bracket, Wichita Northwest versus Bishop Carroll. Now, Northwest is the only undefeated team in 5A. But I'm going to tell you, Aquinas, Mill Valley, and Carroll have all played a tough schedule. To be honest with you, they've all played a tougher schedule than Northwest. Now, I'm not saying they're better teams than Northwest, but they've played a tougher schedule than Northwest. And that Northwest-Carroll matchup especially, both of those matchups actually ought to be great matchups. But I'm especially kind of looking forward to seeing that Northwest-Carroll matchup. That's one I'll probably try to watch tomorrow if I get the chance. But Aquinas and Mill Valley ought to be a heck of a game too. Now in 6A, we've got, again, on the east side of the bracket, you've got two Johnson County schools, Olathe North and Blue Valley North. And on the west half of the bracket, even though people at times thought, oh, Derby must really be down, the defending state champions in 6A are right back in the Final Four. You've got Derby versus Junction City. Derby lost a couple of games early. They had another close game or two that people didn't figure would be close. And so everybody thought Derby was down, but lo and behold, here's Derby in the Final Four. And they're playing Junction City in the semifinals. Now, Junction City has looked strong all year, but they do have one loss. So I think that's going to be a good matchup. And I think on the east side, Olathe North versus Blue Valley North, again, you've got a pretty good matchup there. So I'm really kind of looking forward to those state games tomorrow evening. We'll watch those, and then next week we'll kind of keep you updated on who's playing in the state championship game. Also, Oklahoma, they're in their second round, and we've got some Oklahoma schools in action in the area tomorrow. Boise City is on the road tomorrow. Balco Forgan is on the road. But if you're looking for a game here locally to watch, Tyrone is home tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. That's an 8-man game over at Tyrone. And Turpin also is at home tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. And, that's one of those where Turpin and Tyrone are about 20 miles apart. I suppose you could catch a piece of each game if you really wanted to, and that's kind of tempting. I might do that myself when I think about it. I might go watch a little bit of Turpin and a little bit of Tyrone. Texhoma is on the road tomorrow at Hobart. That game's going to be carried, I think, by KKBS if you want to listen to the game. And Hooker was supposed to play Apache at home tomorrow evening, but Apache has had to forfeit because of COVID issues. So Hooker has a bye tomorrow evening. Okay. All right. I'm going to quickly check and see if we've got any more scores on ScoreStream here for the Texas schools. We'll update you on some of those. Let's see here. And of course, Texas is a big state, so there are a lot of games going on in Texas tonight. Generally, we try to cover the ones that are a little closer to us, but there's a pretty good slate of games. Weslaco's up on Hanna. San Marcos is up on Bowie. That's in the second quarter. Princeton trails Liberty in the second quarter, 20-14. Gilmer over Godley, 21-13. Idalou over Alpine, 28-0 at halftime. Let's see here. There we go. Andrews and Dumas. Andrews leads Dumas 20-7 in the third quarter. That was one we wanted to find for the local, kind of in our local area. Canyon still leads Fort Stockton 31-7. That score hasn't changed. It's now in the third quarter. It was in the second quarter earlier. So Canyon still got a 31-7 lead on Fort Stockton. And I'm just quickly looking through to see if there are any other local teams in action tonight. I don't think there are. Palo Duro and Amarillo High are playing tonight. Amarillo High leads that game 49-3 in the second quarter. So Amarillo High is all over the Palo Duro Dons tonight. By the way, Amarillo is the Sandies, for those of you that don't know, and that's a heck of a mascot. And it looks like that's about it for any halfway local teams playing in Texas tonight. So Texas is in the second round of their playoffs as well. And, you know, in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, all three of those states, there have been some COVID issues, but they have not been all that significant, luckily. In Kansas so far, I think we've had 6 playoff games called off because of COVID issues, and that is out of nearly 200 playoff games played, okay? So somewhere roughly around 3% of games have been affected, okay? I don't know what the percentages are in Oklahoma or Texas, but from what I've seen, I've only seen just a handful of games called off because of COVID in Oklahoma, and they're in the second round. Now, Oklahoma obviously is a bigger state. They have a lot more teams in the playoffs. And then Texas, of course, has a ton of teams in the playoffs. Texas breaks, first of all, they have 6 classifications. They break each classification into 2 divisions. So they crown 12 state champions. So they have 12 completely separate playoffs, okay? Well, that's not all that different from Kansas, in that we also have 6 classifications, but only one of our, we have 6 classifications of 11-man, and then we have 2 classifications of 8-man. So we crown 8 state champions in Kansas. All right, so Texas crowns 12 state champions, right? And a lot of people think, wow, that seems like a lot. And then I want you to think about the population of Kansas compared to the population of Texas, right? Yeah, there's no comparison at all. They have more teams in one classification in Texas than we have in the whole state of Kansas. Okay, so you're talking about, just numbers wise, you're talking about a different level because of the population of that state. So they, again, though, I think from what I've read, that again, you're talking about less than 5% of their playoff games have been affected by COVID. So we've been pretty successful overall in playing football. And as far as I know, almost every state that has gone ahead and played football has been pretty successful. There have not been a lot of problems with it. Obviously, there have been cancellations here and there. To the best of my knowledge, we have not had any high school football players seriously ill from COVID. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a big country. I'm sure that there have been, I'm sure that there may well be some that I'm not aware of, but to the best of my knowledge, there have not been any serious illnesses from COVID nationwide. I know there have not been in Kansas among athletes. Some of them have gotten sick, some of them have tested positive, but we've not had any serious illnesses among athletes. I don't believe we've had any serious illnesses among coaches in Kansas either, although obviously there's much more risk to your coaching population than to your students because of the nature of this disease. It definitely seems to attack people that are older a little more vigorously than it does the young. And let's face it, that's one of the good things about this disease, right? You always hate those diseases that attack the young. The flu is one of those, right? young kids are far more likely to die from the flu than are adults. And of course, it hits the old hard too, the young and the old. But that's one thing about COVID that I've got to say is at least makes playing sports possible, is the fact that it doesn't seem to hit younger kids nearly as hard as it does older people. So guys, that's really, I don't have a whole lot more to say tonight. We've got the playoffs in full swing in Kansas. As a matter of fact, we're winding down. We'll be playing the state championships next week. Oklahoma and Texas, they're really just getting wound up. They're just now into their second round of the playoffs. They will extend until nearly Christmas in Oklahoma and Texas. So we'll have stuff to talk about for at least 3 or 4 more weeks in Oklahoma and Texas. We've got Thanksgiving break coming up next week. All kinds of discussions are being held about that, and I'm not gonna talk about that other than to just say, stay safe. Okay, everybody, stay safe and take care of yourselves over the break. Take care of yourselves and take care of your loved ones, and let's all come back and hopefully get through this healthy. One thing that I have seen a lot of schools this week have announced that they're going to take Monday and Tuesday off next week, extend that Thanksgiving break to a week long. I think some of them are doing that in hopes that maybe things will ease up over a week. I think others probably are doing it almost more as a sigh of relief that we made it this far. Liberal, if some of you that haven't been paying attention to the news, the local news, Liberal has gone to full remote now will go to full remote after Thanksgiving break. Let me be clear on that. They will go to full remote with their elementary and middle schools after Thanksgiving break. The high school is on a hybrid schedule, which basically is a remote schedule in our rooms. And high school students really, they only meet for their homerooms, and that's about 6 hours a week that they meet. And so the high school at Liberal will continue with that schedule after Thanksgiving break. I think some schools that are feeling like they need to go full remote are going to do that in that time period between Thanksgiving and Christmas, because let's face it, if you take a week off for Thanksgiving and then you got a 2-week Christmas break, that means you for 3 weeks of remote learning, you actually get 6 weeks worth of keeping people at home. Okay, so you kind of get more bang for your buck by going remote there between Thanksgiving and Christmas. You get 6 weeks worth of good, hopefully, for 3 weeks worth of remote learning. And so I think that some of those schools that are going to go to full remote, I think that that's a time that you'll see a lot of them do that. And we're already kind of seeing that. So I hate it that we've had to spend so much time talking about COVID-19 and the coronavirus through this season so far, but that is the nature of 2020, Obviously we want to play, we want to get as many games in as we can. At the same time, I understand why the state is looking at pushing things back. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Okay, don't make the mistake of thinking this is a done deal. It's still got to pass through the board of directors as well. So we'll kind of see this coming week, what the board of directors is going to do. We should know something by Wednesday, I believe, of next week. And that'll be something that we'll probably talk about next week. Something else that we're going to start to do, and we may start this next week. If not, we'll do it the week after that, probably. Well, no, actually, in 2 weeks, from we'll go back to Wednesdays. So in 2 weeks on that Wednesday night, we're actually going to have the Liberal bowling coaches on, and we're going to talk about bowling. It is one of those winter sports too. Okay, and they're one whose competition season could be limited if the proposal passes the board of directors as well. So we're going to talk to them. But at some point here, either next week or in the future, in the week or two after that, we're going to start to play some game film. And we're going to start with probably a playoff game from Elkhart from 2009, Elkhart and La Crosse, or we might even play Elkhart Johnson, which was the game that put Elkhart in the playoffs that year. But we're going to start to watch some of those games. I'll probably have another coach or two on with me, and we'll kind of look at the game the way coaches do and give you some insight into how coaches break down game film, and just kind of do a running coach's commentary on the game as we watch it. But for some of you Elkhart players that played in 2009, it's something you might want to watch. You'll get to see yourself on there. And if you're from Johnson or La Crosse, you'll probably get to see yourself. We've got other film too, but those are probably one of those two films will be the ones we'll start with. And this is just one of the things that I want to try to do with the show is give you a little bit of a glimpse inside coaching for those of you that, that have always followed sports but aren't coaches. And this is one of the ways we're going to do it, because let's face it, one of the main things we do as coaches is watch film. Okay. And by doing that, we'll kind of give you an idea of what it is that coaches are looking for, how we analyze film. And we'll also have a chance then to talk a little bit about offensive and defensive systems and why we do things the way we do as we watch that film. So I think it'll be fun for you to watch. I hope it will. We'll kind of see when we try it. Okay. So there's kind of what we're going to do the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we'll talk some about these playoff games and about the state championships, and that's kind of where we're headed. And hopefully, obviously by next Wednesday, we'll have an idea of what KSHSAA is going to do, and we'll start to take a look, hopefully then at winter sports seasons and what's going to happen there. As always, guys, this is a Back Home Media production. Check out Back Home Media's webpage. Check out the other podcasts that Back Home Media offers. One of those is Easy Out Podcast. It'll be on yet tonight. Kansas Missing and Unsolved, which is another podcast which provides a great public service. And I think it was actually one of the first podcasts in our stable of podcasts. We've got the Parentless Podcast, the Elkhart Tapes, Growing Garden City. I'm forgetting some of our podcasts, okay, and I'm sorry if I forgot you, but, check those out. Also, check out the services that Back Home Media can offer you, because they've got some great services to offer. And guys, thanks for listening tonight. And like I said, here next week, we will talk about the state championships. We'll talk about KSHSAA's decision, and we may start watching some game film next week. If not, we'll do that on down the road. I'll let you know sometime between now and Wednesday. I'll let you know what we're going to do on that Wednesday. The first Wednesday after Thanksgiving, we'll have the LHS bowling coaches in here. And then after that, we may watch a little game film again. And then hopefully we'll be into some winter sports seasons after that. And that's kind of where we're headed. So thank you for showing up tonight. Thank you for tuning in. And we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, I don't think it, I thought it, that's different. I said what I said and I meant it, or lamented. Words given weight without thought in a person, the way that I talk and the way that I ought to be able to pause and to say that the fault can be placed on my arms. To this playful assault, to disgrace in its arm. Pray for the day they could wait for the calm. You can't control the storm, only weather it. Whether it's 5 weeks and 5 days of rain sideways, or scorched earth, search for death, or water left with all the thorns, with the petals gone. Settle on the breath of autumn. If the crown fits, wear it. The crown fits. If the crown fits, wear it. If the crown fits.